Carly is not here today, she's sick, so she's gladly staying at home, and I'll be chairing the meeting tonight. And we'll start off with a roll call.
Marsh.
Here.
Binkley.
Here.
Finch.
Here.
Rosa.
Here.
Brenda.
Yes.
Timmons.
Here.
Myself, Bridget. And Carly Winslow is excused as is Douglas.
Yes.
All right. We do have a quorum, so moving on the agenda here, we're at 8, limited public comments. Please give your name and address, and if there's anything else that's besides what's on the agenda, you'll be able to have a chance to speak to the item that's already on the agenda, but if anybody else would like to speak, now's your time. Seeing, hearing none, we'll close the public comment at 7:04. And item B, we have a special presentation by the Northwest Continuum of Care Homelessness Housing by John Sink and Tina Allen of Grand Traverse County Planning. Hello. I see one of you here.
Well, actually, no, we are not necessarily part of John Sink's planning and zoning.
Okay.
We're actually, but I have been here before with him, and he's friendly. No, John has actually asked that we let you know that part of what we're doing here is also going to be part of the, with that new task force that is Acme involved in the housing task force that the county and the city are doing together? Maybe not, but anyway, they are going to be putting together a housing task force, and they will be asking for information about different housing services, and we're one of them. So this is kind of the beginning of that conversation. So I am Tina Allen. I am usually here with John Syke. So, but today I'm not. I'm here as the coordinator of the Greater Grand Traverse Area Continuum of Care. And there's been so much talk in our community about homelessness recently that we wanted to take an opportunity to inform all of you who are making housing decisions about a lot of things that have to do with affordable housing, particularly that housing that deals with people who don't have a home at all. The Continuum of Care is, do you want to put those up? The Continuum of Care is a collaborative of local agencies that work on the issue of homelessness. And we serve the 10 counties of Northwest Lower Michigan. And because this COC, we call it the Continuum of Care, is a COC, because it exists, and you should have a handout, by the way, let's look at it. Because the COC exists, we get funding, the member agencies get funding from MSHDA and HUD for a little over $1 million a year that comes into our community. So for prevention, rapid rehousing, street outreach, emergency shelter, permanent supportive housing, and support services. So the biggest frustration that we have in the Continuum of Care is the fact that there is not enough housing to put people into. We have our agencies have programs that can help and have money to help house people, but there isn't the housing available. So that's really why we're starting at a planning commission level, because you are the folks who make decisions about housing, basically. And we have some suggestions at the end that maybe you can help us with. But first, let's get to where we are. So we tried to get together as a group and said, how can we make an impact on housing? And according to John Syke,
Who's here now, by the way?
Oh,
Sorry.
hi, John. Oh, yeah, John's here. He said you were with me and I hadn't talked to you, so do you want to go first?
No, go ahead. I'll follow in later.
We sat around, we talked about how we can make an impact in the way, according to John and his wisdom. Two of the most important parts is first to get the information out to the community, and then to help, hopefully that information will help make it a community priority. And until it is, we're going to continue having the problems we have with people facing homelessness. So the people I brought with me tonight, one of the speakers is supposed to be Emily Surowich from Northwest Michigan Supportive Housing. She's not here, and I'll fill in for her. But I also have Cecil McNally from Goodwill Industries of Northern Michigan, and Melody Linebaugh from Northwest Michigan Community Action Agency. So some of the groups that are working on housing issues right now are our Continuum of Care. We're specific to homelessness. a Housing Solutions Network, which is part of the Grand Vision. County Collaborative Councils, there are human services collaboratives in each county. The County Housing Task Force that John will talk about a little bit more, and then of course you, the planning commissions. So wanted to show you some of the community resources that are in place right now. So I guess I want to take you back a minute. So we talk about affordable housing, and you know that you can have an impact on affordable housing in general. But we're trying to help define that there's actually something before affordable housing. There are people who are being housed, at least temporarily, in other kinds of programs. And that's the part that we want to kind of explain to you. So some of the things that we have here are Goodwill Industries of Northern Michigan has the Goodwill in shelter and transitional housing capacity for adults, families, and youth. Patriot Place is in Gaylord and is transitional housing for veterans. We have street outreach, permanent supportive housing, which we'll describe in a minute at Carson Square. Then for youth, there's Pete's Place, which is also part of third level and child and family services, and that's a youth shelter. And there's a host home program. Northwest Michigan Community Action Agency has homeless prevention, case management, and foreclosure prevention, and is what we call the Housing Assessment and Resource Agency, defined by MISHDA. Local churches have Safe Harbor, which we've all heard about, that provides just nighttime shelter for homelessness, or those who are homeless during the winter months. Women's Resource Center has domestic violence shelter and transitional housing and permanent supportive housing. Northwest Michigan Supportive Housing has permanent supportive housing. Home Stretch has a couple of supportive housing units. There's Habitat for Humanity, and then Jubilee Center has a drop-in center for laundry and phones during the day for people who are in shelter during the night. So let me go over briefly just the kind of types of housing before you get to even affordable housing. The first would be emergency shelter. And the first part is a definition, I'll just do it briefly. So any facility with overnight sleeping accommodations, and the primary purpose of which is to provide temporary shelter for the homeless in general or specific populations. So who are they? They're people who is served in an emergency shelter. It's people who HUD terms literally homeless, which are those sleeping on the streets or leaving a temporary housing situation or fleeing domestic violence. So they might have been doubled up, staying with family, they got told they were asked to leave, they are then literally homeless. And individuals and families experiencing some type of temporary homelessness and need some supports. And again, in our community, the providers of emergency shelter are the Goodwill Inn, Safe Harbor, which are very different programs. Pete's Place for Youth and Women's Resource Center. The next type of housing is transitional housing. So it's a project that's designed to provide housing and appropriate supportive services to homeless persons to facilitate movement to independent living within 24 months. Or a longer period. So there's some other HUD-related things. But who needs it? Basically, one of the biggest reasons for needing transitional housing now is because there isn't enough affordable housing for people to go from shelter into a permanent housing situation. So they have to live in some kind of a temporary transitional spot until that housing can be found. It can also be individuals or families who have experienced prolonged homelessness and require a high level of support before entering permanent supportive housing, so they're just not ready to be doing it on their own. People fleeing domestic violence, individuals in need of physical or mental rehabilitative services, and certain programs for individuals recovering from treatment or substance abuse. Who provides transitional housing here? Addiction Treatment Services, Goodwill Inn and Patriot Place, Women's Resource Center, and Pete's Place third level host homes. Now, permanent supportive housing is probably the next more permanent housing. It's usually in rental. It's in rentals. It's for homes in rentals with either they're called project-based, where the project itself has some funding that allows for a subsidy for rental, or in different sites, scattered sites. So these are, you'll see at the bottom, it's Northwest Michigan Supportive Housing, who serves people with mental illness and severe, well, we've got a mental health diagnoses or others, I'll get to in a second. Goodwill of Northern Michigan, Homestretch, Women's Resource Center, and Dan's House. So who needs permanent supportive housing? Individuals and families with severe physical or mental health diagnoses. So these are people who are less likely to be able to make it on their own. And chronically homeless individuals or families, those who have experienced homelessness either 4 or more times in 4 years or have been homeless for a duration of 1 year without interruption. So just to kind of go back, the people that are that most of the services of the continuum of care, they receive emergency shelter, transitional housing, or permanent supportive housing. So those are things even before we can start talking about what affordable housing or independent living is. And that's the next page. So affordable housing or independent living is for families who pay more than 30% of their income for housing, are considered cost burden, and may have difficulty affording necessities such as food, clothing, transportation, and medical care. An estimated 12 million renters and homeowner household now pay more than 50% of their annual incomes for housing. A family with one full-time worker earning the minimum wage cannot afford the local fair market rent for a 2-bedroom apartment anywhere in the United States. And in a minute, Cecil will talk to you more about that. So who needs affordable housing? More than 60% of all jobs in Michigan pay less than $40,000 a year, and low-income jobs are projected to dominate the state's economy for the foreseeable future. In our estimation, housing, affordable housing, truly affordable housing is at a crisis point in Grand Traverse County, and that's why we're coming to you for help. So Cecil, would you like to take over?
A lot of this came out of, you can see where it says Alice there, that's a United Way report that they did nationally. It's asset limited, income constrained earners. So it's people who are working, part-time, full-time, the range. You know, so a lot of this I was able to pull out of there, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the statistics. So 40% of Michigan households earn too little for basic needs, which out of the state of Michigan, 1.54 million. Grand Traverse County, 38% of our population earns too little, according to the Alice report, to meet basic needs. 2/3 of jobs pay less than $20 an hour, which is $41,600 for a family of 4, and the average survival budget for a household of 4 is $50,345, and for a single, $16,818. And the U.S. poverty designation is still back at like $23,000 for a family of 4 and $11,200 approximately for a single. So those standards were set years ago, and they've not really kept up with the actual cost of living. Michigan housing stock does not match current needs. There's not enough rental units across the state, and I think one of the things that I'm sure you're aware of here is the cost of housing. Our cost of rentals tends to be higher than the state average. Our average incomes tend to be lower than the state average. You know, and that kind of creates a double whammy as, you know, part of what we're seeing. Housing household survival budget, which was the federal poverty level, and that identifies minimum cost options for each of the 5 basic household necessities. And for each county, it's calculated in 2 variations, one for single adult and the other for family with 2 adults, a preschooler, and an infant. And that's what the Alice report's based on too. So Alice in Grand Traverse County, median household income $51,600, across the total state's $46,800. Unemployment, we're better than the state. There's a Gini coefficient, and we're slightly better than the state. How many households are struggling? Poverty in Grand Traverse County, 4,219 households, so 12% of the population, families in Grand Traverse County. According to the Alice numbers, 26% are under that threshold for, you know, being able to really have affordable housing, to be able to just, live basically above the poverty level. And 62% are above the poverty or the ALICE level. What are the economic conditions? The study used housing affordability, job opportunities, community support. So for Grand Traverse County, housing affordability is 49 on a scale of 1 to 100. Job opportunities are fair at 65. Community support is good at 66. What's it cost to afford the basic necessities? And that was the numbers I talked about a minute ago, about 11.2 for a single and just over 23,000 according to poverty rates. But if you look at, here's a basic budget. So single adult for housing, $632. For a family with an infant in pre-K, $794. So when you start adding that up, and it's not a high number, so for a single person, a little under $200 a month for food, transportation $341, healthcare $130, miscellaneous $144, taxes $141, so $1,583 a month, which is $9.50 if they're working full-time. A lot of people in this area full-time may not be, that's full-time 40 hours, it's 35 hours. 32 hours, and a lot of people are working part-time. And for a family, you basically get to that family of 4, which is 2 adults, an infant, and a pre-K, you get to $55,000. And when you look at the numbers, they're not high. If anything, they're probably a little on the conservative side when you start talking about housing, food, some of those types of things. They're, I think, pretty reasonable numbers. When you look at So here's Grand Traverse County, Acme Township, 1,750 households, or 21% of the families living in Acme Township are either below that ALICE level or poverty level. And you're actually, one of the better townships within the county for those percentages. Michigan wages, and I just put some of this in as an example. So home health aides make about $9.92 an hour, retail's $9.99, and that's an average. It's certainly not a starting wage. Food prep $8.70, nursing assistants $12.34, cooks $10.28. And then it talks a little bit about experience required and typical education. And there's a second page in here if you want to take some time to look at it. And you can always just go to United Way, type ALICE, and there's a Michigan. And if you go into that, it breaks it down by county in Michigan, and it'll even break it down by townships for you. So, county housing data. Grand Traverse County, owner-occupied, 27,566%, below head of households, below that ALICE threshold, 37%. Extreme housing burden, and it uses a slightly different definition, but 18% of the people are paying more than 25% of their what they earn for housing. Renter occupied, 69% are below that threshold, and 53% of them, it's an extreme burden that they're paying more than a quarter of what they earn just for their rental. And the gap for affordable housing units in Grand Traverse County, and this was 2012, was 2,340 units. And that was a one-year estimate. And then here's some rents, and these are probably complexes that you recognize. Bay Hill, which is off Veterans Drive, Bay Hill 2, Riverine by the Governmental Center, Sugar Plum, which is on Garfield, south of Airport, and that actually has the lowest. So for somebody to be able to, a single to be able to live at Sugar Plum, they need to earn $11.44 an hour working full-time. And that's at 30% of their income. And for a family, for a 2-bedroom, if there's one person, they've got to earn $12.98 an hour just to afford the $675, and that's the lowest. It goes all the way up to $800 for 1 bedroom at Bay Hill and $1,050 for a 2-bedroom at Bay Hill too. And this was just a couple examples I did real quick. So 35 hours, somebody in retail, that's frequently what full-time is, unless, you know, go up a little at Christmas at $9.99. They earn $18,182, which means they could afford a $379 a month rent, and the low end for 1 bedroom was $595. For a family, if you had one person working retail and another home health aide, and the one person's full-time and the second's part-time, because maybe they're, you know, sharing childcare, they can afford $594 a month rent, and the 2-bedroom at the low end was $675. And again, this isn't just people who are homeless or experiencing homelessness, this is general population. You want to go ahead?
Yep, I'm ready. Good evening, I'm Melody Linebaugh, I'm the manager of homeless prevention for Northwest Michigan Community Action Agency. Our agency is the first point of contact for people experiencing homelessness or those that are at risk of homelessness. Each year we receive, I think Tina talked about it earlier, we receive a MSHDA Emergency Solutions Grant. For people who are at risk of homelessness or are currently homeless and they need some financial assistance to attain permanent housing. This grant begins October 1st and ends September 30th. But the unique piece about it for this year is we were heading into the end of August and we still had $2,600 left that hadn't been spent. Now this is normally, in the past 10 years, we've used this grant at the latest by the end of March, beginning of April. Usually this money goes out the door because we have such a need. It's not because of the need, it's because we didn't have housing to put people in. It wasn't because there weren't people knocking on our doors. We just didn't have the housing. It's a shortage in our community. The number of people needing help did not lessen, and it's not because they didn't qualify. It was the direct reason because we don't have lack of safe, affordable housing. Let me give you a better picture of what's happening today. Our centralized intake system took in 954 calls in October and 942 calls in November, approximately 48 per day. NMC has 132 people experience homelessness waiting for a housing choice voucher, and that includes 12 veterans, which makes up, that's being served through our supportive services for veteran families, but that makes up 12 family members and 6 veterans. Northwest Michigan Supportive Housing today has 260 to 300 people waiting for housing. Women's Resource Center has 30 people, which includes children waiting for housing. Goodwill Inn has 109 people in shelter right now, and they have 10 families that are waiting on a wait list with children waiting to enter the shelter because it's full and there's no place to stay. And then Safe Harbor has been averaging between 45 and 55 people per day. And these are people that need permanent housing now. I just want to give an example. We have the importance of having housing available to us. We had, NMCAA was working with an Afghanistan veteran who was suffering terribly from PTSD, and he was living out of his truck. And he lost his family when he came back from divorce, just because of all of what he had gone through, and they just couldn't survive together. They were struggling. But he kept living his life out of a truck, and so each month, 2 or 3 times a month, our case manager, street outreach from Goodwill, would meet up with this gentleman to try and encourage him to get out of his truck. And then one day he did call our agency and said it was time. And we worked diligently for probably 2 to 3 months before we actually got in permanent housing. And we finally asked what was it that actually made him decide to make that move. And he said that in the divorce, his daughter finally called him and said that she would like to come and stay with him for a weekend and visit. And he said, I can't have her sit in my trunk for the weekend. So those are the type, I mean, these are people that we're dealing with. We're dealing with real lives. That just of people that, and we were worried because it did take us 2 to 3 months once he decided. And sometimes people, when they get into that mode of deciding that they want housing, not deciding that they want housing, but when they're ready to go and we don't have housing available, it puts them at risk of staying in their truck. So that's why it's very, very important to do whatever we can and we appreciate all that you can do for us in this matter.
Things that you can do as a local government to play a role in increasing affordable housing. As you're working on your master plan, make the issue of affordable housing for those living at the lower end of the economic scale a community priority followed by intentional actions. One option provides zoning that requires developers to include 15%, 10%, whatever the number of proposed housing to be affordable by MSHDA standards, or to provide payment if they don't want to do that for a set-aside fund for affordable housing. There's times too when we talk about there's a lack of apartments. I mean, I think, you all know that there's probably apartments available here and there, but it's also that when you're using vouchers or something, MSHDA has a maximum they allow, and most of the units that are available now are beyond those dollars that are allowed. So, finding a way to require or incentivize developers to make a certain amount affordable. Allow density bonuses, so if you have a certain number of units per acre or something like that, if a developer will add affordable housing, give them an increase, in that density for that purpose to be able to do that. Because the best way to develop that is mixed use if it's at all possible. So if there's a way to do that, increase maybe the amount of density. Allow accessory dwelling units or granny flats. Any zoning area can do that. Build over a garage, a separate unit that allows for that, or sometimes even within the house itself. Review zoning ordinance and master plan to identify and change regulations that may restrict development of low-income housing. Allow for scale tax abatements for MSHDA defined affordable housing units. So when you go to apply for low-income housing tax credits to MSHDA, which is basically how you build most of the affordable housing, one of the things that MSHDA requires is a payment in lieu of taxes or pilot. And that's something that basically you have to, as a township, support to be able to get that type of funding in this area. And we compete against developers all over the state, and it's a whole point system when you do an application for development that we're competing against areas that get more points because they're metropolitan, or if they can rehab something in a depressed zone, they get more points. Well, we don't have the depressed zones by definition in northern Michigan, so it hurts when you play that point game, and it is a point game in terms of who gets those housing tax credits that allow the housing to be built. Review benefit fee structure charged to multifamily developments. Some of the townships for like a multifamily were about $7,000 a unit. If you try and build 30 units, that's $210,000 for the privilege of hooking up to sewer and water, not actually for the hookup cost. So I know like Garfield reviewed and they cut theirs in half for multifamily. So Goodwill's actually getting ready to break ground on the multifamily, but the first time we applied, that cost us points because there's an affordability number you have to get at. You can either get 0, plus 10, or minus 10 points. So the first time we were negative, since it was reduced, we were able to get to 0 or 1 or 2 points. So it helped us in that application. And that's the same process anybody building affordable is going to face. Review cost of fire suppression for multifamily developments with the intent to increase the ability of developers to construct affordable units. Review issue of development of safety and living standard, inspection for rental units, including mobile homes. Not all areas require inspection, so in some cases there may be something affordable, but again, before a voucher can be provided to somebody for that, it has to pass quality inspections that MISTA lays out. So if the different units of government hold that out for mobiles or apartments or anything else, that helps in that process. Provide guidance through the development application process for local nonprofits. Provide written support to nonprofits when applying for financing. One of the things that MISTA looks at is what kind of things have been done to allow for or kind of incentivize affordable housing, or what kind of infrastructure developments have there been that allow for it. Because you basically have to have water and sewer hookups for any affordable housing to be built. So lots of times it's infrastructure improvements that even help too, and just providing a letter that indicates that you support a project, you support affordable housing for all residents within your township, and what kind of things just have even been done in that area that encourage that. Reduce the cost of public land purchase for nonprofits creating affordable housing, and coordinate with the Grand Traverse County Land Bank to increase resources to nonprofits creating affordable housing projects. At the state level, sometimes we think we don't have a lot of power at the state level as local units of government, but encourage the state to invest in rural communities, where water and septic, because right now you can't build affordable housing under low-income housing tax credit without sewers. You can't build it on septic. Weigh in when MISTA presents their qualified application plan. Every 2 years, MISTA puts out a request for feedback, and there's guidelines in there for qualified application plan, and then based on those comments, they'll make changes, and then in the next cycle, that will go into effect, and it runs for 2 years. So for instance, supportive housing, there used to be points for that, permanent supportive housing, so people with mental health issues or physical issues. And the for-profit developers objected to that in the QAP, so MISTA took the points out. So it became harder to, again, meet that kind of threshold or that competitiveness. So there, you can weigh in, and they listen to that, and they'll go back and they'll balance that out against all the comments, and then even encourage, like the state, to codify accessory dwelling units statewide. And California has that, Michigan doesn't, but in any jurisdiction in California, you can build an accessory dwelling unit if it fits within the zoning guidelines of that municipality. But by right, you can build an accessory dwelling unit. So, and then, go ahead, Tina.
Well, that's really it. I guess right now we'll just take questions, and then we'll let John talk. But mostly this was just to come out and let you see that there are some other levels of housing that are happening, and that there are many, many agencies working together trying to solve this issue. But right now, the biggest barrier in our way is this lack of affordable, particularly rental housing. And any help you can have when you're going through your master plan or looking at zoning would be very much appreciated. But do you have any questions? Yes.
Yes. When veterans are here in the area, is there a agency specific that deals with veterans and housing, and especially those that have come back with PTSD? Yes.
We have a supportive services for veteran families program to help veterans and their families who that are either homeless or experience or at risk of homelessness, and we do help them. We do have financial support, and case managers do work with them. Also, Goodwill has Patriot Place. Do you want to make mention of that, Cecil?
Yeah. Patriot Place, it's actually in Gaylord.
Gaylord.
But it covers 29 counties.
So it's Goodwill that,
So it's Goodwill. So,
okay.
you know, they can go to, they could come to us, they could go to Community Action, they can go to the VA.
And a lot of times we work together
Yeah.
with the same families, so we kind of combine the programs to stretch the dollars and to really have a bigger impact with the veterans.
Right, and the VA will qualify them for Patriot Place. They can stay there for up to 2 years. That's transitional housing.
And how much housing is there in
There are
Gaylord?
24 units. There are 4 duplexes, 3 bedrooms on each side of a duplex, you know, living, dining, kitchen. So they were basically built as duplexes. And the veteran has, you know, their own bedroom, and 3 of them will share basically a house. And there's support services there. And it's only male homeless veterans.
It's only what?
It's male veterans.
Male.
Yeah, you either had to have male or female.
Okay,
And
where
the
did the
male number
female
of
go?
veterans was about 5 times the number of female veterans.
So
Well,
where
we
did
would
they-
still work with them, we'd refer them to
We do,
community.
yeah, we probably.
But as far as the housing part,
So they have vouchers and things like that, other
And
services that are
financial
available. Right,
assistance.
financial assistance.
and they can stay there 2 years, and we'll refer them to services. And it's been a good piece for veterans because they relate well to each other. So besides the professional support that's provided, there's kind of a natural support
Okay.
because a lot of them, you know, face the same types of
Right.
things as they went through the military.
Any other questions? Just state your name for the audience before you ask questions.
It's not really a question, but I'm Jim Hefner, 4050 Bayberry Lane. I'm probably like a lot of you that didn't think that there was homeless in Acme Township, that this was primarily a Traverse City issue. I walk up to get my paper on a long driveway, and I can look over into the Vasa parking lot. And last winter was a long, hard winter. And I looked over one morning in the dark, and there was a car sitting in the parking lot. And I thought, wow, somebody's really hardcore and out there training before work, probably with a headlamp on or something like that. And then as the daylight got as I went along that week or the next week, the daylight was a little earlier. And I noticed something was on top of the car. And I walked over and down through the Vasa parking lot, and there were 2 child seats on top of the car, and there were towels on the windows around the car. And they were coming in there late at night and using the bathrooms that are at the Vasa for heated restrooms, and then they were leaving early in the morning. And I started asking around I wasn't aware of who to contact, and somebody told me Goodwill Outreach, and about the time I found that out, they had left then. But that's right here in Acme, right at the Vasa Trailhead.
And that might be happening more, because I too saw someone parked out in our orchard field off the Vasa a couple of mornings in a row, yeah.
Anybody else in the audience? The planning commission? All right.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I'm just curious, you talked about helping families and helping them first find affordable rental units. I'm just curious, does anybody help them, take out part of your paycheck so that they can eventually come up with a down payment?
Yes,
for
we put
housing?
them, our case managers work with a budgeting. They either attend a budgeting class or we help them with their budgets. That's usually not the case if, with our presentation. A lot of these people have had their car break down, and instead of paying their rent, they'll utilize that, or a sick kid, and they pay for their prescriptions. So usually their budgets are so tight, it's not because they're frivolous with their money. It's more so that they've had something catastrophic happen. And that's not everybody. There is a small percentage of those people that have difficulties, but for the most part, the majority of people just experience
Yeah,
some type of emergency within their household.
I'm a retired teacher, and I've seen this coming down the pike, and it's really nice to hear that somebody is being proactive to doing something, because.
And we didn't even mention the amount of homelessness within the school system.
Yeah.
It's amazing how many children, it's over 200 children within our school system.
It is truly
Just
amazing.
in the Traverse City area.
Yep, I worked with some homeless kids, and it's like, you can't even call parents because you don't know where they're gonna live, or where they're gonna be the next week.
And they're good at hiding it.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Usually it's part of a case plan at the Goodwill and our case managers will also work with people. We have a basic budgeting class, which is really basic. Beyond that, we send them community action. But our case managers, usually as part of the case plan, there's a plan for how much to set aside of what they're making to start saving for that. And then we have some funds that if somebody saves up, you know, like enough for their first month's rent, you know, we can help with deposit. You know, so there's some of that piece, those pieces that go on as well. And it, probably about 2009, we got to the point where only about 19% of the people at the inn were working at all. Now I think we're back up between 50 and 60% of the people staying there are working. They just don't make enough income or have enough hours to be able to afford housing.
Steve,
Yes, Max.
I don't know if John or Tina or Cecil can answer this question, but I had experience one night in a Big Boy having coffee. A man and woman walked over to my table and said, "Can you give me a ride to the governmental center?" And I said, "What are you going to do over there?" "Well, we get a bus to the church so we can have a place to stay." They said, "Where are you from?" "Well, they're from downstate, and they came up here because they could find a place to live at night." Do we know what percentage of the people come to Traverse City because they know they get housing at night?
It's not as big as I think the kind of what the word is out there. When you look at the statistics, and we enter into the State Homeless Management Information System, Community Action does, and most of the other agencies that work with people who are homeless, it's like, I think it's 80% are from, or 76% are from within Grand Traverse County. I think it's like 86% are within the 5 counties, and it's like 92% are within the 10 counties.
So
And
those
then
other,
there is a percentage. And most people, I mean, they don't need to come up here to find a shelter to sleep
that's what I was
in
going to ask.
overnight.
They
I
can't
mean,
find them?
Yeah, there's
outside of-
shelters, you know, in other places in the state and downstate. Usually most people that end up here have some connection.
Right.
Some people left here, or they, you know, they may have family relationships that have fallen apart, but they have a son or daughter or family that lives here, and they'll come back, you know, and probably move in with that family for a while, but whatever caused those fractures to begin with weren't dealt with. So, you know, they may be there for a short amount of time, and then they're out on the street.
We
So-
actually, every end of January every year, HUD requires that we do what's called a point in time count. So it's always the last Wednesday of January, which is terrible for us, but, so when you do that, they record where each person by zip code. So that's when we've been able to see that very, very few come from other zip codes. But beyond that, it only counts the literally homeless people we talked about, which are people who are in shelters or are on the street, not in a place not meant for human habitation. But the number that is really almost impossible to get a handle on are people that, like, kind of what he described, that what we call doubled up and are precariously housed. So they may have come here, they may live here anyway, and they're living with somebody, some friend or some family member who, and that's more often the case with these children. And that any moment they can be living, you know, in their car somewhere. And those are the hardest people to get to because they aren't necessarily getting service anywhere. They might even be going to work every day. And it's just harder to find them. And I don't have the number, I have it, but not with me, for students. But last year was the first year we were able to get a pretty good number on our 5-county continuum of care. So Andrew, Benzie, Grand Traverse, Leelanau, Kalkaska. There were 802 kids who did not have a home on the date of our homeless count. So that's it.
John, do you have anything else you want to
Yeah.
finish this up on?
Good evening, John Syke, the Grand Traverse County Planning and Development Director. Just wanted to mention, in our department, as we're tracking things, and when we talk housing, we're not just talking about affordable housing. We're really seeing the challenge in our community go with almost the full spectrum. So when you think of housing, at one end you have homelessness, and at the other end you have home ownership, single-family homes. Really, the demand is broadening beyond affordable homes. So rental housing is, it doesn't matter what your income is right now, trying to find, particularly in the Traverse City immediate area, trying to find good rental housing is becoming increasingly a challenge. What we're seeing is our population is growing. We're gaining about 1,000 people a year. That's a net gain. So we have people leaving, people moving in, we have people being born, and we have people dying. And at the end of the year, we're gaining about 1,000 people. It means we're a pretty transient population here too, so the demand is increasing. We're right now at a little over 90,000 people. We might hit, I don't think we'll quite hit 100,000 by the end of this decade, but there's still a chance that we could. But the forecasts are to continue that 1,000 person population increase every year. One of the things that we found is really, okay, how do we start to deal with some of these issues is really basically production and accessibility to housing. And one of the things we found is, while we do have some developers like Goodwill that are building housing, we don't have a really strong affordable housing developer in our community. Homestretch is an organization that was kind of filling that role, but really needs to be revamped and taken to the next level. One of the things is really the models have changed dramatically, particularly from the direction from MISHDA at the state level, in terms of how we do housing in our community. Certainly when it comes to incomes, it's better to have more mix of incomes. So for instance, you have market rate units mixed in with affordable units, so that really in essence you're not kind of just putting into incomes into one particular type of housing type, but it's really about a variety. For example, if you've been into downtown Traverse City to Midtown development, which is just off of Cass, those are condominiums in there, but there's some affordable units in there that Homestretch manages 8 of those units in there that really, as people, as those are for home ownership, so as those are sold, Homestretch retains the property to that, so that when it's sold, the ground that the condo is built on, so when it's sold again, people have to qualify for the income. And a lot of these different agencies have different income requirements depending on what their target area is. But the bottom line is, we were looking for how do we start building housing, because even if we were to build market rate housing, particularly in rental units, that's going to free up some of the demand that probably people are renting units that could afford the newer units, then that frees up some of the ones and so forth. So that's where the idea for the housing task force came to be. And that right now is Grand Traverse County, the city of Traverse City, Garfield Township, and East Bay. And I think some people said, well, why didn't you do the whole county? Well, we wanted to focus strictly on the urban core, because that's where we see some of the highest demand, and really not a lot of the production. You see a lot of new homes, you see a lot of expensive condominiums going in more in the urban core, but not a lot of rental housing opportunities there. So we wanted to focus on that, and that's where we see a lot of demand. But we're also looking at potentially getting some of the other entities, potentially maybe like Acme or Green Lake Township, where Interlochen is at, or the Village of Kingsley, who can help to support some of this issue, but really their perspective might be a little bit different because they're not really involved right into the urban core. But the Housing Task Force is really just to provide some recommendations on how we can build better structure, how we can have the nonprofit capacity that can see housing development occur in our community be reinforced and strengthened. We see a lot of opportunities in terms of private and public partnerships on how to get housing built. There's a myriad of ways, but right now we just don't have quite the capacity. So that's what we're really focused on with that task force at this time. So.
Thank you, John.
I'd like to thank you all too. Thank you
you.
very much.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Bring us back to the planning commission here. Yeah, it's a tough task. with the cost of land, you know, the cost of infrastructure, cost of building materials, to have affordable housing. You know, it's a big issue that we need to look at, and you just gotta see what we can do as a planning commission to integrate that into our master plan to help that along. Okay, with that, we're gonna move on here to item C, approval of agenda. So I'm looking for approval
I
of
make a
agenda.
motion to approve the agenda as it's written.
2 minutes?
Second.
Got a motion, second, any discussions, all in favor? Aye. Against, 0, abstained, 2 absent, motion carries. D, inquiry as to conflict of interest. Seeing none, we'll move right along. Consent calendar. Marcy, do you want to read that for us? Or your trade, you read that.
Consent calendar, the purpose is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together for one board motion without discussion. The request to remove any item for discussion later in the agenda from any board member of the board, staff, or the public shall be granted. Tonight we have a receive and file draft unapproved minutes of Township Board, November 12th, and Parks and Recreation Advisory, November 5th. We have action on drafted unapproved minutes of the Planning Commission, November 10th.
All right. Does anybody from the planning commission need any of those items removed and put on the agenda? Anybody from the audience? Okay, with that, we'll look for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll make a motion to approve the second calendar.
Motion by Timmons,
Second.
second by Finch. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, 2 absent, motion carries. Okay, now, item F, we didn't remove anything. Correspondence. We did have 3 letters, but that's going to be moved into the next item because they were in relation to the public hearing, and they were letters of in favor for the landscape ordinance amendment. And with that, we'll go right into that. We're looking at the public hearing tonight. It's the ordinance amendment to Article 7, Section 7.5.6, landscaping. Right now, I will open that to the public at 7:55. And please come up to the podium and state your name if you have any comments regarding this landscape ordinance.
Good evening, Eric Takayama, Lautner Road. I'm a landscaper, and so I thought I would stop and comment on the ordinance. I have not read the proposed ordinance, and I guess I should have, but I understand it's from my friend Jim here that it's in regards to incorporating native plantings and such into the ordinance, and I want to speak in favor of that. I basically started my business based on that concept, and I'm not supporting it to increase my revenue. I'm as busy as I can possibly be. But I would just encourage that, you know, when you, and you're a landscape architect, so I'm preaching to the choir, but even more important thing than just focusing on native plants is to restrict the use of, you know, especially the top 20 invasive species. Probably half of you have autumn olive battles going on in your yards. So there's a perfect example of, you know, an ornamental plant that got out of control and is taking over Acme Township. So I urge you to incorporate that type of wording, and also to allow for cultivars of native plants, especially in a commercial type installation where you know, there's got to be a lot of compact installations, beds, islands, things like that, where the actual native plant would get too big. So that being said, thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Anybody else? Seeing no one else, we'll close the public hearing at 7:57. Bring it back to the Planning Commission. All right.
Mr. Vice Chairman?
Yes.
May I comment on this? I haven't been at the last two meetings because I wasn't asked to be, so I haven't been part of this discussion, but in looking at the ordinance tonight, I want to make two recommendations to change, not really non-substantive,
Okay.
but in D2, the last words
Okay.
on page 2 of the proposal, the last two words are after the effective date of this ordinance. And then in D3, it says after January 1st, 2015. Those are really unnecessary when you adopt this, or, you know, there's no reason to tie these to a timeline or anything. When you adopt this ordinance, it will become effective and then it will be enforced. So
Okay.
that's really surplus and unnecessary. So, and it won't matter for the
Okay.
status of the public hearing with the notice, because it's really not substantive.
All right, that is noted. Anything else? Okay, with that, we're looking for any questions and/or a motion to approve as it's been amended by John I.
Recommended approval.
Recommended to approve it to the board. If we do that in motion.
I would make the motion to make the changes suggested by Jeff Jacks and recommend to the board that we adopt the native plant landscaping ordinance 7.5.6.
All right, we have a motion by Timmons. Do we have a second? Second by Marsh. Should we take a roll call vote on this?
You don't usually take roll call.
Okay.
No.
All right.
Can if you want.
That would
It's
just,
not particularly controversial as I understand.
I don't think so. I think everybody's in favor of this. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Abstain. 2 absent, motion carries. All right, now we're in new business. And we need action on this item here for our schedule for the Planning Commission 2015 calendar.
So we just have to make a motion to accept the calendar?
Yes, or make any revisions you might think we need, or
To approve the resolution.
approve it to the resolution.
I make a motion to approve the resolution of the Acme Township Planning Commission calendar, resolution number PCR 2014/01.
I second.
Motion by Timmons, second by Finch. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, 2 absent, motion carries. All right, now we're into old business. We have the Advanced Auto Site Plan Review. Beth, did you wanna, or Nikki, did you wanna start us off on this?
Sure. We do have a couple representatives from Advanced Auto. Here we have Bill Crane from Anderson and Crane Engineering, and we have Mike Murray representing Advanced Auto, and then also their attorney, Mr. Dorn. Thank you. So the request is site plan review for a 6,830 square foot building at 3939 M72. We had last month a little introduction to the project. And our planning consultant, John Equangeli, has reviewed this project and has made several comments. And Bill, while we're talking about this, did you want to put your board up? Sure. And we can kind of walk through it together. So again, this is at 3939 M72. It has a shared drive with the Lee Plaza next door, ingress and egress driver shared in the front, and also the back side. let's see, I'm just gonna go in order here, things that were not satisfied. Signs, we had a submittal earlier in the month that exceeded the sign height. They have resubmitted that. The height of the sign, pole sign out front, well, it's actually a monument type sign, is 6 feet and 30 square feet for the face size, so that does comply. They have 2 wall signs, one on the front facade and one on the side. They're 71 square feet, which is less than the 20% required of the total facade square footage. Our planner has requested, and Bill, I'm not sure if he discussed this with you, the use of porous pavement for the rear parking bays.
I saw it in the report, but we've got some information that we'll present
Okay.
on that.
Okay, I wasn't sure on that one. And John was recommending against the wall pack lighting on the front facade facing M72 without some other architectural details. The wall pack lighting is still shown in the front facade as they showed it to us last month. And we requested something else. And he's also recommending that window awnings be used on the elevation facing the M72 side to give some architectural detail. He also suggested the look of the Petoskey store, which you do have a photo of, where they required awnings on that building. We do have a requirement, well, it's not a requirement, it's a notation in the M72 US 31 Business District Ordinance that encourages that awnings be used on buildings in that district. They are presently working with Metro Fire on a fire alarm system because they're putting in a new well. They do not have a suppression system, and so they are making appeal to Metro Fire. We do not have the date for that presently. I think they met once. They have to go back. Brian Belcher, the assistant fire chief, has told me he will notify us when they're meeting again. So John Ecoangeli is recommending at the end of his report that if you so choose to make an approval of the site plan, that is made contingent upon fire approval for Metro Fire. And the other outstanding issue is the transparent windows, which the applicant will provide. However, he's stating that there should be about 42 inches clear area between the windows and shelving units. Otherwise, the shelving applied against the windows defeats the purpose of being able to look into the store and the displays in front of the windows. And lastly, he's also requesting that the landscape materials must comply with the recommended planning guidelines for municipalities as published by the Northwest Michigan Invasive Species Network. And I think that is all that was, yes, outstanding or of concern on this review.
Thank you, Nikki. Jeff, do you have anything to add to that?
No.
All right, we'll let the applicants.
Good evening, my name is Pete Doran. I'm an attorney and I'm here today representing the Acme 72 LLC, which is Michael Murray, and seeking your approval for the site plan review. And because your township attorney is so able and so good, I don't want to be presumptuous to give you legal advice. So I'm going to tell you what my legal thoughts were given to my client. So I'll just repeat what I told to Mr. Murray. Generally, site plan review is to look at the proposal to make sure it follows everything that's in your ordinances, primarily the zoning ordinance, but any other ordinance. It's very unusual to put conditions in the site plan review process. And you do have some conditions here which we all agree with, and there have been numerous concessions made in the back and forth in the site plan review process with Nikki Lennox, your zoning administrator. So there's been a lot of modifications made. I think the lights issue has been worked out to the township's satisfaction. What they wanted is going to be done. But we do frankly have a problem, and we object to the Beckett and Rader stipulations number 6 regarding awnings, number 7 regarding the porous pavement, and number 8, which is a restriction on what goes on behind the glass, within the store, which is going to be rented to Advance Auto if it's approved. And the landowner will really have not much control over what happens behind the glass. Certainly you can require glass walls as a restriction, but it's very, very unusual, I think, to regulate through zoning what is occurring inside the building. In regards, I'll start with number 6. In regard to the awnings, Ms. Lennox has pointed out that your ordinance says to encourage, and you have encouraged it. But Mr. Murray will tell you how expensive they are, what a maintenance chore it is in Petoskey and would be here. And we don't think that the requirement of a awning, number 1, really does what your ordinance says, which is, doesn't say it's required, it just says encouraged. So to require would be to go beyond what your ordinance says. And we think that it would not be a reasonable condition because of the expense and the distance of this building from the street and the sidewalk. Regarding the porous pavement, both, Bill Crane is here today. He talked with Tim Lodge. He'll tell you what Tim Lodge said, the city engineer, where they've got some examples of it. I traded voicemails with Tim. His voicemail to me was, if you could do it if a landowner can do it in any other way, that's the way you should do it because of the maintenance and the clogging of this type of device. And we think that engineering-wise, both Mr. Crane and Gosling Zubek have indicated that the reservoirs are suitable for the taking away the storm water, and the emergency overflow is directed to in a way away from the creek. And Bill will also show you some Elmer's estimates regarding the initial expense, how much more that type of pavement would cost for the project. As to what goes on behind the glass, again, I think that's what we would say. It's agree with the zoning administrator statement at one point but it's the landowner or the land occupant's option as to what happens behind the glass. I mean, in a non-retail context, I mean, there certainly would be privacy reasons that you'd want breakers. And I really don't think that it should be a condition that's imposed. And that's what I told my client, and Mr. Jocks will tell you what he thinks is good for the township. But they do have a contractual arrangement with Advance Auto. If it's approved, Advance Auto is contractually going to obligated to rent from them, so they do have a real desire and economic incentive to have this project go through. I'll turn it over to Bill.
I'll speak to you in just a second.
All right, Bill Crane with Anderson & Crane, here representing Advanced Auto. What I will talk to you about is actually the porous pavement item that was brought up by the planning consultant. As Mr. Dorn stated, that I did have a chance to talk to Tim Lodge, city engineer of Traverse City. They actually have done some test samples of this porous pavement, and actually parking lot K behind the post office on State in Union, I think it is where they did the test samples, one for porous asphalt, one for porous concrete, one for pavers. In talking with Tim Lodge, They put them in roughly 5 to 6 years ago. The porous concrete they've already replaced at one time already. It didn't perform the way they thought it should, so they actually replaced it one other time. In regards to the porous asphalt, they are currently not recommending doing any porous asphalt in the city of Traverse City due to the biggest concern is maintenance in regards to keeping that porous pavement clean. What the porous pavement is, it's a really loose asphalt which allows the water to flow through the pavement into a stone layer which is typically 12 to 16 inches thick underneath the 4 to 6 inches of asphalt. Below the 12 inches or so of stone, there's an additional 2 foot of engineered sand which allows the runoff to go through the asphalt and through the stone, which cleans out particulates, cleans the water before it gets actually into the groundwater or the aquifer. But the biggest concern with that porous asphalt is the maintenance. Here in northern Michigan, everybody uses salts and sands to keep the ice off the pavement. What that salts and sands do is it actually gets into that porous pavement and clogs up the system. What happens when the system gets clogged? Where does the water go? That's the biggest concern that the city of Traverse City had with Tim Lodge. The only way to do that is actually take a vacuum, a big vacuum truck and or power wash on a biannual basis to actually maintain and clean those porous systems. But there's not a guarantee that you're going to get 100% of that silts and sands out of there. So over time that accumulates and actually clogs up the porous pavement. Cost-wise, and actually on the second sheet of that item that I gave you, is an estimate from Elmer's Asphalt. I spoke with Dave Viswat, he's kind of the asphalt manager at Elmer's. And what he did for our plan broke up in 2 different proposals. The bottom proposal, which is the estimate that's for what we were originally proposing, just a 3-inch asphalt, or 3 inches of asphalt with 6 inches of gravel underneath, came up to be right around $34,000 for our parking lot. If we were to go through with the porous asphalt, which combines 4 inches of porous asphalt, 12 inches of 6AA stone, and 2 foot of additional clean sand, would be about $80,000, which is a little over about 2.5 times as much cost to have a product that we can't guarantee how long it's actually going to last. And that's a huge investment for something that we really don't know the overall or how long that system's going to last for our stormwater control. And it was brought up in the ordinance for the LIDs, the low impact development. And actually I did some research with the low impact development of Michigan. There's a design guide for implementers and reviewers. I mean, actually in this design, or in this manual, it calls out that infiltration basins, retention basins that actually we have proposed in our original approval, or our original plan, do fall under low impact designs. They allow for sediment control, they allow for stormwater quality, which allows the water to flow through the topsoil, the sands and the silts to take out any sort of particulates, any sort of contaminants. It actually helps with the temperature of the water. As the water flows through the ground, it actually cools off as it goes through the system and gets back to our aquifer, so it helps with keeping the groundwater at a warm or a cooler state than it would be if you were having the water come across the asphalt. Also, another thing, it reduces runoff volume. What it does is actually accumulate into that basin, won't allow it to leave our site because we do have it designed to contain stormwater on site. And it actually helps with erosion control and sediment control. And it's all contained on site in that basin. If at any time that basin does need to be cleaned, it's actually a lot easier to clean a retention basin than it is to try to clean porous asphalt. The only way to clean porous asphalt is tear it up and start over. Within a retention basin, most of the silts and sands are going to accumulate as it's entering into the basin. So there's a smaller area that you can actually go in with an excavator and clean that out if it needs to be done at that time. It helps with stormwater quality. Like I said, the particulates, the contaminants, the oils and gases and greases are contained in that location for a better overall system. like I said, I spoke to Tim Lodge, the city of Traverse City, Dave Iswood at Elmers, and then actually talked with Clyde Johnson at Gosling Zubek. And they all came up with the same concern, maintenance. How can we guarantee that that porous asphalt is going to be something that we're going to be able to guarantee for a long period of time? So that covers, I guess, our concerns about the requirement of the porous asphalt as part of this condition of our approval.
Bill, what's the average life of regular asphalt?
Regular asphalt, depending on, we're looking at a 3 inches of asphalt is what we're proposing. 12 to 15 years is the guide. Depending on how the maintenance is on it, if you keep seal coating, it's actually going to go longer. But yeah, they say between 12 to 15 years.
And the porous pavement, what's the average life of that? Elmers, did they estimate how long it?
They didn't, in that they've only installed porous asphalt one time, and that was this year at the Myers-Manistee project. That's the only time in the however many years that Elmers has been putting asphalt down that they've ever installed a porous asphalt. So they don't have any projections, or they don't have any history in regards to how that asphalt's going to maintain or or how it'll operate.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering, did you do the whole parking lot as porous pavement and not just the back few?
That was the whole parking lot, correct.
Now, I know that we looked at porous pavement for our parks, and we're still in debate when we do new parking lots, and we're doing only 20% because it is the exact same cost for the other 80% is for the 20%. But due to stormwater going into the bay and being so close, that's something we really want to look out for as a community. So would you consider looking at where the water drains and doing a smaller area of porous pavement? Or, and I don't know if you could answer this, or maybe Steve could help, but with the low impact development, like in the retention basin, is there any way to put plants or something in there to add a level of filtration before it goes anyplace else underground?
I don't know, one of the concerns in regards to putting a lot of plantings in those basins, that is our snow storage.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's the possibility of damage of those plants once the snow is placed into those areas also.
Did you look into rain gardens? Because a lot of the type of the plants that people put in what you would call a rain garden, which would be something to use as filtration, are plants that typically you might look at as weeds. They'd be flowers and things of that nature, but they don't take much maintenance, and they take a lot of impact.
Sure.
So that's just something to think about, that they wouldn't be high maintenance plants to begin with.
Correct.
Anybody else have any questions for the applicant?
No, I have my question for you.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
I do. Can the public ask?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill. Then we'll bring it back to the planning
Michelle,
commission.
Acme. When you say you have a stormwater system plan, the basins,
Yes.
what are they planned for? 10, 20, 70? What kind
They're
of storm?
designed for a 25-year event, which is what the ordinance requires. We do have an overflow route that's capable of a 100-year event, which actually directs the water to the north and the west from the site.
Okay.
Yes. And that stormwater plan has been approved by Gosling Zubek, which is the township engineer. They've approved the designs that currently sets.
Thank you.
If I may, I'd like to
Sure, go ahead.
speak about the awnings just briefly. Mike Murray is my name. And with respect to the awning issue, the awnings, the idea surfaced when I presented the Petoskey store. We've been developing for Advance for many years and done many stores. And Petoskey is the first store that we actually put awnings in. Advance doesn't put awnings in just because it's primarily it's a maintenance issue. They're just not equipped to take care of those awnings. It's untested, and it covers up the window display. It's just a different look. In Petoskey, we agreed to go ahead and put in the awnings. We didn't realize what the cost of those awnings were going to be. One, it was a surprise that those awnings were $5,000 a piece. It was $15,000. There were 3 awnings there, so $15,000 in awnings in Petoskey. They agreed to do the awnings in Petoskey because the store was right on the corner of Main and Main. It's literally on the street. So if you're sitting in your vehicle You can see into the store. It's really not obstructed. You can look up from your car and you can see the ceilings, the ceiling lighting. You can see all the displays. So the store presents well. The feature of the Petoskey store is really to show you the pack lighting and how that looks, because we use pack lighting on all 4 facades of that store. And what we think is, and what we've heard is that the lighting looks good. According to that community, perhaps that look though doesn't play with what you're doing here in Acme Township. So we presented 2 separate alternatives for lighting. Working with Nick, we showed one lighting presented by the National Vendor that Advanced Auto approved and uses. They really had one alternative to the pack lighting, which is the cylinder lighting, and it casts light downward. And you have that in front of you, I believe. If you don't,
This one here or the other one? Oh, the other one. Yeah, they got that one.
and then there's a second one.
Can we hand it out?
Sure, if you would. Why he's handing that out, the advanced objective is they like to sell, car parts, quality product, quality price, and their stores to look quality. They like a very attractive, presenting store. So what they aim to do here is, candidly, is cast a clean image. And when the case of the windows came up, I was sharing with it that, and with you in the last meeting, that the concern was, one, the distance from the street. We're over 100 feet from M72, and cars are traveling at 55 miles an hour. So when we presented the opaque windows, we really didn't think anyone would object to opaque on account of, I'm not so sure that the windows are such an issue when you're in a car from that distance from this traffic light, that cars are really going to be able to see into our building. We're concerned about being noticed. One, we have the building right on the corner of the street that's closer to M72 than we are, because we're offset behind them. So if you're coming at 55 miles an hour, really your only view is off the front of the windshield. Once you get to the side, it's kind of a blur when you're traveling that speed. So on the angular view, and you're coming down a hill, you're going to see the building and then you're going to see the trees in the corner. I'm not so sure if you're westbound, if you're really going to see this, the facade of the building. And if you're eastbound, you start to pick up speed from the light. I'm not sure if you hit 55, even though the speed limit says 55. But you're going to, again, be looking at an angle at the building. And it's from such a distance that, Advance isn't so concerned about using the transparent glass. Now, on the safe side, they do want to ensure that that the clean look is preserved, and they have fixtures. And the fixtures have this black Martech backing, and if it's going to be transparent glass, they want to, and they intend to put design on that black. So it's not black; it'll be some design graphics, not advertising, but design graphics. Because it's a primitive nature, it's not something that's swapped in and out. By going with transparent, what they give up is the following. As they give up, one, the benefits of, they have sustained development objectives, which is reducing their energy costs, which is good for all of us. On a project-by-project basis, and with all their stores, the more that you can limit the windows on the side, the lower cost, the lower energy consumption, the better for everyone. And merchandising, they move then their shelves right against the facade. There's a false insulated wall behind opaque glass, and they can carry a lot more SKUs. Once you go to the transparent glass, like in this instance, by their choice, they're moving the shelving away from that window, so they have their design graphics, and it presents well. But they lose SKUs in the process of doing that. Just by moving it 24 inches, they lose 1,500 SKUs. If you were to go 42 inches, it would be 3,100 SKUs. And a SKU is just a type of a product. So if it's a Stanley hammer, it's Stanley hammer plus the depth of that. They may carry 10 Stanley hammers. So as far as products, they lose a tremendous amount of product. You know, to the extent that it really, the site isn't viable for them. So they really need the controls over how they merchandise their store, where they put their displays, how they present it. And as a developer, I've never interfered with how they do that. They tell me how they're going to lay out their stores. And often I'm the last to find out, because those merchandising plans will get changed over time, because they have teams that just specialize in that. They have marketing departments that specialize in the presentation. So, you know, before they're open, I'm given the final look of the store. The benefit of the transparent windows, in working with Nikki, she's correct in the sense that you do have more natural light that comes in. So what you lose in the energy side, we're perceiving it as, all right, during the day, you'll get some natural light that diffuses through the stores. Does it offset the loss in energy costs? You know, no. But you know, Advance is willing to work with you. I don't know if you recall, but if you were to say, hey, how are you different from Petoskey? You have not only different from Petoskey, you're different from any store that we've ever built. You have more windows on the facade of this store than any store we've ever built, with 75% of the windows, which really limits us in what we can do with the presentation of the front of the store. But we've tried to work with you, and we've made a number of different iterations.
So the store set is the same for Advanced Auto in all their stores? Do they,
No, it varies.
It does vary by store?
It does. And for the most part, though, we have just a couple windows.
How about the awnings? How do they hold up under the Petoskey weather? Has that been is it long enough to really know?
It's not long enough to know. The lifespan of those awnings isn't long, and we don't have anyone who's to maintain the awnings. And from a distance of 100 feet, we also think, one, it's just covering up the windows and, you know, areas for, if we have displays in the bottom, perhaps you can put signage up for 20%. Now, we wouldn't likely put it up on the transom, and Advance said they wouldn't put it up on the transom, at least that's what they've shared with me. They would likely put their signage down below, but they like the idea of light diffusing through the space, at least from the transom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just one question, so which light fixture are you planning to use or propose to use?
Oh, in that regard, they said, you pick. They said they're okay with either one of those choices.
Okay.
Yeah, if you were to say, hey, let's take a vote, yeah, I'd put my ballot in for one of them, and we could tally up, you know, the votes if you wanted to do that. And we'd be okay with the outcome.
All right, thank you. We'll bring it back to Planning Commission. Any other questions for us to discuss? Questions? And I have a couple of statements too, but I want to hear what other questions there are.
I just wondered if the wall lighting issue had more to do with observing our night sky ordinance and not the actual look of it.
I think it was more of an aesthetic thing. We're looking at more of with a gooseneck with a shroud, which would meet the dark sky ordinance. And these look like they meet the dark sky ordinance because there are downlighting and we have cutoffs. And I'm looking at this too, and I do agree with their presentation. You know, this is a site plan review, and it's not a special use permit, so we really don't have the leeway to, you know, have certain demands on this. So we have to look at the site plan. I don't think we have any say as to what's on the inside of this building. And I'll let Jeff respond to that too, but I don't know if we really do, or even how it looks aesthetically. I would like them to dress this up a little, have a little more character to the building for the aesthetics, to try to get that new urbanism, get, you know, eventually have, you know, the sidewalk where people are, you know, pedestrians using the area and stopping in and things like that, and to dress it up. But I don't know that we can make them do that as part of this site plan review. The only issue I would have is the low impact development, whether or not we would have them do that. And I have my opinions on that too, which I'll share in a few minutes, but I want to hear what other people have to say.
I'm curious what kind of maintenance issues there are with the awnings. Just the snow.
Ice build up.
You could have ice build up. I know in Sutton's Bay, one of the awnings collapsed last winter due to the snow, and unfortunately nobody was walking underneath it when it collapsed. It's a maintenance thing mostly, and the initial cost. But it does make it look nicer.
I wasn't here last month when you just talked about it, so
Mm-hmm.
what's the reason that John would have
Well,
suggested?
we were trying to get them to dress up the building a little bit, make them more aesthetically pleasing. And I think those are more recommendations than requirements. So we're actually, if you look at what we're doing, we're in a site plan review, the actual site plan, because it's a use by right. Any other questions here?
A question about the glass. I'm confused about what is the glass, what's the recommended glass? What do you want to put in this building? Is it transparent glass or is it opaque?
By code, it's non-reflective transparent glass. What we had proposed was opaque glass, but as Vicki correctly pointed out, in your zoning ordinance, it specifically specifies non-reflective transparent glass. And unless we wanted to go through a prolonged, apply for a variance and such, you should stick with the zoning ordinance. And we are, partly it's contractual, because we're under contract to purchase the property, and we do not have the length of time to really go through a variance.
So it's regular see-through glass versus
Right.
spandrel and not in see-through
Right.
glass.
Right, so you can put signage up behind the glass and it can be seen from the street? Is that some of the, would that be a benefit of having clear glass
Yeah,
or no?
well, there would be a benefit if there were advertising, and there will be some advertising, and they'll, from time to time, up to the 20%, they will use that. But that'll be on the glass. But as far as the benefit of being able to look in the store, they really don't see that as a benefit. All their stores, if you go around all their stores, they really like to have that as a solid wall. They don't see the benefit, because their customer really knows what they sell. And they like to go ahead and stack that box. It's really tailor-made to custom fit their shelving, and so they can have as many SKUs as possible. It's important for them that when a customer comes in, they can find whatever it is that they're looking for. That's what they're selling, is the convenience, and they have to compete with the internet and other options.
There's not a lot of window shopping for car parts.
Well, and it might be even a thing of, you go to the Advanced Auto over on Airport Road and it's laid out like this, you come to this one, it's laid out like this. You see some of that sometimes in chain stores too. They want, the antifreeze to all be in a certain place in all of their stores.
Right, or the cashiers, right by the register, and they're positioned a certain way. You're right, they do want it, they're very specific. Yes.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Anything else? Jeff, I'd like to get your opinion on what their attorney presented on what he said about what's inside the store and
Right.
that sort of thing.
First, sometimes I window shop. It's fun to look around. So, I haven't been asked to look at this at all yet, so this is all, I quickly read through the packet today before the meeting, but I haven't been part of this review. I tend to agree that a site plan review doesn't offer a lot of opportunity for the planning commission to approve with aesthetic type conditions necessarily. So, to the extent awnings are a recommendation, I don't see a whole lot of authority for the planning commission to demand it. If you're absolutely in love with awnings, this is all new. I haven't had a chance to look at really the ordinance. I'm going based on what I've heard today, so I don't have any actual review of it myself to compare. But based on what I'm hearing, it would appear that you don't really have the authority to demand an awning. The porous pavers or the porous asphalt, I don't know the status of the stormwater review and whether the stormwater, I mean, I looked at this, it appears that Gosling has said the stormwater is satisfactory. If it meets the ordinance, and it meet, you know, but then I see that John I's report says, there's no, I forget where he had it in his discussion, this site does not include any low-impact development technologies, and the applicant will need to address why these may not be practical. I'm not sure if the stormwater ordinance, if this is that, I don't know whether it's satisfying. I presume that it must be if it was reviewed, but there's a question in my mind as to whether it is based on what John I said, so I don't really know necessarily. To the extent that there's, yeah, I mean, I've seen that, Nikki. I see it says, the engineer has addressed the comments above and made adjustments to the plan regarding subsequent discussions. The final plan reviewed by us for stormwater and found acceptable as revision 3. So is that the drawing that's part of this packet?
Yes.
So then I would presume that the stormwater meets the requirements. Again, I don't, because I'm just looking at this new, I don't have the ability to talk to John and talk to Bob over at Gosling to say, okay, is this consistency, is this an issue? Where are you guys at really? If it meets it, it meets it though. So I guess that would be my short answer. I wish I had more for you. I was trying to find the drawing.
It's C3.
Maybe sheet C3 is the stormwater control grading plan.
It's the fourth one.
Yeah. You must have changed something from the 11/24, because this has a more recent date on it. Bill? He's approved a drawing from a previous iteration.
That's 12/1.
Yeah, he says 11/24. What changes did you make between those two?
The relocation of the bike rack, the note for the height of the light pole to be 20 foot 8 inches as required by the zoning ordinance or by the planning commission, the plantings on the landscaping plan. I think those are the 3 items that we addressed per the last meeting.
So there's no changes to the stormwater?
Not to the stormwater, no.
I mean, you know, so again, that's my, honestly, I don't have a specific answer. If it meets the requirements of the stormwater ordinance, which it appears to based on Bob's review, then it meets it.
Okay.
As to what happens behind the glass, I think probably you should shy away from any requirements as to where stuff's stored inside. I mean, I understand the aesthetic issue of it. If it needs to be addressed in the zoning ordinance, maybe an amendment to the zoning ordinance indicating, you know, street views and addressing that would be appropriate, but I don't know that, you know, some condition that says there. I can't imagine they're gonna crowd, I'm speaking sort of in my view, you know, not a lot of stores wanna put the backs of products sticking at the window of the stores. I don't know what they'll do with that, but you know, that's more of my own independent thought as opposed to legal review, but I don't recommend trying to deal with that right now.
All right, Pete?
If I could just, and I apologize to Jeff for not, I got called in on this just on Friday, and
Yeah.
I looked at, just briefly at the ordinance, 7.5.4, 7.5.4 B5 seems to say that it should be asphalt, but that you may allow a different service, as if somebody comes in and proposes it, then you may allow it, so.
Okay,
You mean in the zoning ordinance?
Yeah.
I know that porous asphalt, my experience with that, you know, it's a good product. It's difficult in northern Michigan. In the wintertime, it does get clogged. You do have to do maintenance on it. They do have trucks that vacuum it out. but you don't always get it cleaned out. And in the wintertime, if it gets clogged and saturated, you have a freeze and then a thaw, the ground will stay frozen and you'll have runoff and potential flooding. And this is a small site, so I don't know how much would actually matter if you did that type of asphalt, porous asphalt in the back of the building. I'd rather have it go into the basin than opposed to flooding it out. If you look at where it's at, you're not that far from Acme Creek. You don't want it to run right off into the creek. You want this to work properly. And the porous asphalt could work, but you gotta be right on top of it all the time. And so you gotta be careful there. You want this to work properly. And it sounds like Gosling Zubek says it doesn't meet our requirements. Apparently.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it says.
Yeah.
It says reduces.
And
John,
as
here
far,
we could ask.
and it's not designed as a rain garden or anything like that. It'd be nice to have some of those plantings maybe around the back. But I know if this is used for snow storage, it's just gonna get, anything that is of any size will get pushed over by the plows, because they'll plow right in there. Any further comments,
Yeah,
questions?
The question I asked you is, did you or Nikki have any conversation with John on how he defended his position of wanting those 9 spaces porous paved?
No, well, I did not. I don't know if Nikki did, but that's the first I saw it tonight when I came in.
Okay,
I don't think we talked about that previously.
yeah, okay.
No, that's correct, we did it at the last meeting.
Okay. Well, there is in your packet a suggested motion as one of the options. There's several we could do, is approve it with some of these issues or conditions. With none of them could be tabled to the next meeting, which I don't think we really need to do that. I would like to see the awnings, but those are recommendations. I don't think we can actually impose that. Porous pavement at this location, it would be kind of like, I think like a guinea pig. To do part of it here where it might work, but it might not work. Because it's such a small site. And then what happens inside the window, in my opinion, is that's not part of a site plan review.
Yeah, I would just interject, assuming someone will be moving to approve, I would suggest that you do incorporate 1 through 5.
Well, yeah, that part,
Okay.
yes. Michelle?
Before you go to a vote, I just wanted to ask if, in the near future, the speed limit in that area is going to be substantially reduced, so that that building is going to be more recognizable, more noticed. I thought we were putting in speed.
There's plans for that redevelopment.
So that would make an entirely different situation possibly for that building.
Correct.
Just a question.
And then if, there's also the options of the light fixtures.
Are there any substantial differences to how the 2 new light fixtures illuminate? Because I see that one shows that it points down only, but the second one that's on here, I don't see anything that shows how it illuminates or what the footprint.
They're both downward directed lighting, and they're more or less directed to emphasize the building itself. I mean, they're directed, downward lighting right straight down.
That's correct. Advance's preference is the first one if you were to ask what their preference is. Yes. And downward lighting.
I guess my preference is the black light.
Yeah, I'm fine with that too, and I'm fine with the original ones on the sides and backs. But
I think the black ones, they wanted white.
white,
Is that correct?
Correct, they wanted white.
it'll be that style.
That's
no
style
white.
in white.
So any motion should have 6 added that would include the light choice instead of giving you the option.
Do we have a picture like this without awnings open?
The elevations in your, yeah, you have a blow up of
There should be one in the back of your, it's a black and white elevation.
We don't have a picture of the store along the road like that photo. That's the photo of the Petoskey store. But this is what the elevation would look like as you're facing M72 without the awnings.
And it will not have the red backing.
Only the red.
No, no red backing. It's, they prefer red backing, but it's, because it's their signature brand look, but it's not. It's gonna be an ethos, and it's a, what's the color? It's
I
a,
thought that was in our notes from last.
that's one of the changes to the iterations, the changing the backing. Do you recall that?
That's not red.
That was in the
Like a
previous
cream
color.
color.
Right.
It's a
I didn't
beige,
bring mine either.
it's a beige cream color.
How would we put in something for the lighting? Would it be the little lighting?
Yeah.
Or do you?
I would say, yeah.
You don't want to put one thing out on this lighting. When you
Right,
look-
that's how the sign is gonna look, and the color is pale cream color.
Just John?
When you look at the white version of that light, that's an upward and downward light.
But they're only gonna have the downward. They're
It has
they're
that.
specifying a downward.
Yeah, they can put a cutoff at the top, because it'll have to meet our dark sky ordinance, so they would not allow a fixture to go up.
All right.
And so maybe if there's a motion there, then we could have a 7 for this revised sign color from the red.
It looks like the, I don't know what date. that
You have the
drawing
sign
is still.
submittal, the sign submittal
Is part,
has it,
right, as part of that submittal.
right?
So we don't have to worry about that. It's fine. What about, are there any signs they could put on the back of that? That would make it, I know that if they're pushing snow into the front of the retention area, they can't do plantings, but is there anything they could do on the back side, the other side?
Theoretically, there could be.
Would you be open to putting plantings in the back of your retention pond? Not where you're pushing snow, but the back side where it's just going to be touched by the water and the grass anyways? To make some of that a little bit more.
On the back side here, where the existing trees are located?
Well, yes, but something down lower from the trees, so it would be more like plants specifically planted to help water filtration. If you need help finding some, I can happily get you resources.
We have our new guide. Maybe
Yeah, but we're
grasses.
looking for rain garden type, not just native
Not
plants.
just native.
There's a different type of plant.
So you're talking about on the back berm here?
Yeah, on the back berm.
At water level?
Well, they're gonna be a dry basin. They're designed for a dry basin, so there won't be standing water
Right,
in the ponds, only for a short period after a rain event.
and that's the idea, is the
Right.
plants that are used are just for the filtration of that water.
Correct.
So they have deeper roots, they're looking for their own water source anyways, they're meant to be in crops. But
Correct.
they feed off from that and then filter the water. So I guess I'm just asking if they would be open to planting something else active, that's all.
So, yeah. I guess at this time, I mean, I guess we presented our landscaping plan.
Okay, with that, I'm looking for some type of motion from the planning commission to approve, reject.
Wait for more information.
I would make a motion to approve. Yeah, find the text here, whatever the text is.
Right here.
The site plan submitted by Acme 72 LLC for the construction of a 9,830 square foot advanced auto store located on a .77 acre parcel located on M72 with the following stipulations as follows. 1 through 5 as written, plus 6, that the light fixtures shall be the Lithonia LED cylinder lights in white.
Downward facing.
Downward facing only. Downward projecting only.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor.
Second.
Pardon, where did it come from? Okay. Next, second, is there any other discussion?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, but
Yes.
Michael's just informed me that the square footage is not correct in this. It's what size?
It's 6,912.
6912 is the square footage, not that 9830 that's in the suggested motion.
6830 to 75.
6912 is the correct square footage?
6912.
Yes.
Yeah, we got that. Okay. Noted. That's part of the suggested motion, which really isn't part of the packet. So, you got it.
Yep,
6912 is on the site plan.
So your motion's amended.
6912 it is.
Motion has been amended.
Was there a second?
Next, briefly, is it,
Can you second that?
Second.
all right.
Second.
Roll call, or are we all good with everybody?
You don't need, I mean, you don't, the only, historically, Acme only does a roll call on one vote, so.
Okay,
yes,
that's
you-
fine.
You're more than, you have the discretion to call for a roll call, but
Now use that discretion not to. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? 2 absents. Motion carries. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, now we're at the last section. Public comment and other PC business. Public comment. Yes, Eric. Public comment.
Eric Takayama again. I don't know how long, any of you plan on being on the planning commission, but my comment just is based, kind of originates from awnings, I guess, but from observing development, which is what I do. I've lived in many states and done a lot of traveling and been in architecture and landscape architecture and design and install and observing new construction all over town. From Lautner Road right to, the Bayview Inn will become your downtown corridor over the next 5 years. And you're going to be inundated with proposals such as this. I'm sure there's real estate transactions going on that, you'll see in 6 months, 2 months, what have you. Acme's the new hotspot, and if you know any realtors, you'll hear that. I got my information from Bob Brick, who says that, as soon as the Meyer project was approved, people were scrambling to find property in Acme. So, that from Lautner Road to, at least Bunker Hill, that's gonna be your downtown corridor. So, I had thought when I was on the board that we had put some stuff in the master plan and revised the ordinances to reflect having some power to, enforce appearances on buildings and such. And I could be wrong, but I thought, you had more power to enforce things like awnings and so forth. I mean, you look at Division, for example. Meyer went in there, 25, 30 years ago now? I can't recall. But it was just, Buffalo Field, but now you got car dealerships and every type of fast food restaurant, and if you pay attention to the cycle, everybody built right after the Meyer was built their own franchise concept or whatever was cheapest. Now it's transitioning 20 years later because the market is so fierce along that corridor that now the old buildings that were built 20 years ago are getting ripped down or remodeled. People are buying them, and you've got, like the latest one was Panera. It's got awnings, it's like, they're competing now for space along that corridor. So I would urge you, as you start reviewing the numerous plans you're going to start seeing over the next couple of years, to think about how you want your township to look as it becomes the corridor of division. Because, you know, that's, you can go the same route they did in Garfield, where they allow everybody to come in, rubber stamp, footprint, and appearance, based on what's cheapest to build and get in the place and out. Or you can go the route Garfield has, where when the new plans come forward to tear down what's ugly and put in new, they're requiring awnings and nice facades and, you know, things like that. So, I think I've said my part, but I believe you do have more power than what I'm hearing tonight as far as, you know, we can't really enforce awnings. And it doesn't have to necessarily be an awning. In architecture, it can be a raised seam aluminum or a standing seam aluminum shed that just transitions the length of the building, that's a different color with some, you know, modern type steel beam supports. Very inexpensive to put on, a couple $1,000s, and, you know, it looks like a whole different building. So, you know, don't get stuck on the awning thing. It doesn't have to be canvas or what have you. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? With that, we're going to close the public comment. Now we go to zoning administrator update on projects. Vicki.
Yeah, I don't have too much on projects. In the next month or two, we'll see Redwood Homes coming back. They should be wrapping up some engineering changes and finalizing their site plan submittal. I did want to bring to your attention, I'd like to put on the agenda for next month for discussion of electronic signs. Over the last couple of years that I've been here, I've had several inquiries for digital signs. And this is the second one that I've had in particular for the Shell gas station, wanting to change their price signs to electronic, so they don't have to go out there with poles and hanging letters in the middle of winter. So I'd like to bring that up for discussion as how it pertains to gas stations for the next meeting.
Is it just gas stations? Or is it?
That's what I'm thinking, and I would like the discussion to start on gas station electronic.
If I could quickly inject, yeah, John had asked me about that, and I mean, Shell had some sign request to have a digital gas price, and the way the ordinance, the sign ordinance reads right now, I interpret that to be prohibited. So, township needs to decide whether it wants to allow a certain level of those now or not.
Technology
Well,
is
yeah, I guess
changing.
you don't need to decide, you need to decide if you want to decide.
Right, so that's why I'd like to bring it to your
Right.
attention next month for discussion only.
Are you saying that the digital signage period, as it stands now in the ordinance, is prohibited? Is that-
Yeah, the way it reads, really, yeah, basically any electronic sign is, even though that's, I mean, I think, I can't say what the planning commission's thoughts were necessarily and the board's thoughts when that last sign ordinance was reviewed and amended, but I know, you know, that was on the sort of early stages of electronic signs and LED signs with signs flashing and changing all the time. And I know there was a lot of concern at the time, like we didn't want those. And there wasn't really any discussion as far as I recall as to, you know, gas station price.
Yeah, maybe we can also discuss what our authority is on some of these coming up and what we can actually enforce and,
well,
you know, with
yeah,
compact
I mean,
design and, you know, the aesthetics, the architectural aesthetics of, you know,
well, okay, so
the facades and things like that.
Eric, you know, the form-based code you adopted for this whole business area district, and so the ordinance that wasn't in place when you were around is now been replaced with the new form-based code, and it does have, I mean, remember there was a lot of talk about, will we demand architectural standards, will we demand materials, will we demand, no we won't, yes we will, and it fell out the way it fell out. And, I mean, it does, you know, the ordinance does say awnings will be encouraged. Frankly, I don't know, maybe you should think about that, and, I mean, do you want awnings in all the buildings or not? If you do, you know, you should be more clear or specific.
We do, and that's a transition between the form-based code and a site plan review, and then the architectural aesthetics and things like that. There's the whole connection that we have to make sure we're on the same page with.
Yeah, I mean, you should say canopies and awnings may be required if the, planning commission determines it's necessary or something like that. Are encouraged.
Especially in the form-based code, because if you encourage things, you're gonna get the money thing all the time. Well, it costs too much.
Yeah.
You'll get that all the time.
So maybe there's some tweaks that could be thought about for form-based code, if that's,
Sounds good.
what you want, the direction you want to go in.
Right.
Now's the time.
It is.
Sorry.
And our consultant's not here. Any education update? Will we be having anything next month for education, or are we?
If we can get it together between either myself or John and Jeff, we plan on 6:30 for the next meeting.
Okay.
Try and start out the next year. We do at least have some videos we can show.
Right.
Yeah, on the big screen. You bring your popcorn.
All right.
We'll start
Anything
with
else
those again.
with the planning commissions you want to bring forward? With none?
Yeah, no, I
No,
wanted
we have
to,
one more.
bring this to the board's attention. We were, obviously,
That's right.
we were nominated for a placemaking award, for the Acme Shores placemaking strategy, by the county, and I'll just read how they presented it. I was able to accept on behalf of our planning commission, so I was wanting to do this last month, but unfortunately I was, but I'll just read how they presented it to us, because I think it's a great body of work that was done by Beckert Rader, community, citizens, and Leonard played a large role in that as well.
I think Virginia Teagle did also.
As well, yeah, so I think it just bodes well for all of the community, both at the township governing side and the private side, and in addition to citizens within Acme. So the way it was read is by following. This evening, on behalf of the County Planning Commission, I'm pleased to give special recognition to Acme Township for its placemaking plan. Acme Shores, a placemaking strategy for the US 31 shoreline corridor, positions the township to focus on its bay shore. It's a citizen-driven strategy that merges the acquired shoreline park properties along with the current challenges of the US 31 corridor. It anticipates forging beneficial connections between local businesses and the emerging new public space along East Bay, resulting in mutual economic, functional, and aesthetic benefits. This effort not only improves the Acme community, but bolsters its role as a gateway to the Grand Traverse region. Congratulations to Acme Township on completing a great plan. And they present this with a plaque.
Awesome.
Nice.
Thank you. Very cool.
Okay, get up here.
Okay, with that, motion to adjourn. Do I hear that?
Motion to adjourn.
Second that.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All right.